Welcome to another episode of the LRA's Capital Connection. I'm Wendy Warren, your host, and LRA President and CEO Stan Harris is with us today. We're 5 weeks, a little over halfway through this session. We're going to give you an overall advocacy update at the state, federal, and local level today, and Stan's going to kick us off with what's going on at the Louisiana legislature.
So last week we hosted our annual lobby day at the Capitol, and we had LRA members come up to hear policy briefings from some of our elected officials and those people who are seeking other offices. We had John Stefanski, who's a state rep who is seeking the Attorney General's office, Senator Kirk Talbot, who's the insurance commissioner, and anyone who's trying to buy commercial property or commercial package insurance today is keenly aware of what they're going through with that. We also had Tim Temple come speak to us, who is the only candidate for Commissioner of Insurance at present. So it was a good day. We brought everyone to the Capitol to be able to speak to their representatives and senators, and we introduced our LRA officers on the floor of both chambers, so it was great fun. Week before that, just to stay connected, we hosted our Restaurant Heroes event at the LRA House in Baton Rouge, our advocacy base there, recognizing many members of the legislature that we identified last year at the end of the session who were big supporters of ours. So we've got a lot going on, a lot of things happening at the Capitol. It's kind of hump week. We're at that middle part, and nothing good happens after this. Only bad things can happen, so you've got to pay very, very close attention.
Yeah, there's rumors swirling around that they're going to end early, but like you said, that's never happened in all your time.
Yeah, in all my time, they like doing two things. They like making laws, and they like collecting per diem. So they get to do both of those if they're in session. But wrapping it a little closer to what's going on in the session. Last week we had a bill from Matt Willard, House Bill 141. That was up in Judiciary in the House side that's gone to the House floor now that don't know if it'll get off the floor. It's a bill that's part of our settlement of our New Orleans alcohol litigation. We agreed with the city if they repealed the $1,000 per permit alcohol permit processing fee that we would help get a small increase back on the alcohol licenses for Orleans Parish. This is an election year. A vote of that takes a supermajority in the House and the Senate, and I just don't see people passing fees. So we're talking to the author right now to decide our strategy for going forward, but I'm thinking that it'll probably be heard and returned to the calendar subject to call and sit there for the rest of the session. A couple of weeks ago in Natural Resources, we defeated a bill called House Bill 528 by Matt Cormier from St. Bernard Parish. It was a bill that would have really changed the way that restaurants operate in dealing with imported seafood, especially shrimp and crawfish. We did not oppose a bill that does some additional testing and moves that testing from LDH to LSU Ag, but it's under LDH's purview. But what this would have done would have brought the wildlife and fisheries agents, who are already overtaxed and understaffed, into restaurants to check your menu and impose some really extensive fines, up to $5,000, and including multiple offense, losing your food service permit. We pointed out to them that we did not believe that Wildlife and Fisheries had the authority to yank a permit, and then they tried to amend the bill. The challenge that we have is we understand that the domestic shrimping business is under stress.
Right.
But historically, they've kept a very, very long season. The processors fill up their freezers, and then the prices drop. We can look at the map on pricing, and it's happened like this ad nauseum for years and years and years. But what we're not going to let the shrimpers do is make restaurants the scapegoat of their fury.
Right.
We're going to stand up every time. We'd love to have a robust domestic shrimping business. It's a hard business.
Right.
And a lot of these folks are independent. They don't consolidate. They don't work well together to market. And we're going to continue to have these conversations because we do want to serve domestic product as much as possible. But if the independents aren't there, then someone's going to fill that gap, unfortunately.
Right.
So we certainly are very interested in the product, but we've got to have conversations that are real solutions, and this was not a solution to anything.
No, this was throwing, someone under the bus for the problems that industry is incurring.
Yeah, and look, a lot of what we've talked about on Capital Connection through time has been unintended consequences, right?
Yeah.
So we've had a disagreement with the state ATC related to the service of alcohol at a table in a restaurant in a parish or municipality that allows you to take a drink with you.
Right.
What we determined in that is really state law doesn't provide any parish to take a drink with you. So we have proposed a substitute bill that's now House Bill 651 that has come out of House Judiciary and off the House floor. It's moved over to the Senate and will be heard in Judiciary B shortly. And it treats the ability in the parishes that allow it for you to have a drink at the table or pick up an extra one at the bar. The dispute with ATC was that they saw it as very different in buying it at the bar versus buying it at the table. And I really felt like that it was a distinction without any difference. It was the same licensee, the same responsible vendor, so those types of things. So that should move along. We do have the support of ATC, and we have had the support of the governor's office so far. And we also asked Representative Ilg, who brought 651 for us from Jefferson Parish, to bring a bill to try to help smaller organizations that put together raffles and fundraisers. What we found last year in doing one in our Acadiana chapter was they have really ramped up the rules, and it requires training on volunteers and separate bank accounts and things. And all we were trying to do was do 52 weeks of dining and give away $5,200 gift cards. So I think that's going to move through the process very, very soon.
So do you want to talk about the bill that everyone has called? It seems like every news outlet has called about, which is the 18, 19, and 20-year-olds.
Yeah, so early on when Senator Mizell filed Senate Bill 194, I understand why that is. We're sensitive to the fact that it came out of a tragedy. But a lot of tragedies, when you peel back the layers, always have some layer of responsibility or culpability that's in there. And I'm not defending what happened after, and I certainly find it abhorrent. But at the same time, we have to remember that 18, 19, and 20-year-olds have legally worked in bars, have been able to perform there. And one of the absurdities that I said had this bill passed was that an 18-year-old could own a bar, they just couldn't go there and work. So when we point out some of those things, especially in the challenges that our bar industry went through during COVID, being one of the few industries that was closed completely down for a lengthy period of time and had the longest restrictions to their operation, just felt like this was piling on. We worked with the author. We worked with the members of the Judiciary B committee to propose a massive set of amendments that basically took the 18 to 20 restrictions out of there. It increased some fines and penalties for people that used a fake ID. It increased the fines and penalties for people who serve underage. And it tried to add some stricter language about what happens to someone if you serve or overserve someone who's in one of these age groups. We believe that exists in the statute today. I think it's been in there for a long time. But that's going to be up to smarter people who follow these laws. Senator Mizell had her hearing. The folks that came to testify on behalf got a chance to have their day. But ultimately, we appreciate the work that Judiciary B did in working with us and the author, because she could have made it a lot more painful to try to get these on there. And she's committed to try to look at these issues going forward. And our job is to make sure that we keep them informed about both sides of those issues.
Exactly. That's what makes a good lobbyist, I'm told.
Yeah, what you're trying to do is give them the facts and not your facts. And I've always said, you're entitled to your passion. You're just not entitled to your own set of facts. And it's the same way that we've dealt with bills that we've defeated in the last couple of weeks, dealing with setting a state minimum wage and then putting a 40% increase in it in the first couple of years that it existed. That same bill, identical bill, is in the Senate today, and we'll work to defeat it over there. There's also a bill that will come up next week in House Labor that would propose that employers of more than 25 people would have to provide up to 12 weeks of paid sick leave or paid family leave to every employee.
Wow.
Obviously, the business lobby is going to come out strongly against that. We had a bill that was similar to this before, where the state was paying a good bit of it and the employee was paying into a pool to be able to draw from that. And maybe that makes some sense. But right now, this is a split between the employer and the employee. And the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act only impacts businesses with 50 full-time employees or more, not less. And so we have a lot of businesses that if they raised it to 50 wouldn't be hit by this at all. But again, when you put a policy or a law in effect, doesn't mean that somebody couldn't try to squeeze it down and make it a smaller number in the future. Mm-hmm. So we want to be cautious about having good policy that's aligned. And so we'll continue to pay very, very careful attention. Also next week will be an expansion of violence in the workplace legislation that seeks to impose on the employer or the operator of the facility more responsibilities in the event that a tragedy happens with someone that could be a third party that's not an employee. So again, it's one group of people that are looking at this saying, we want to make sure that we have this. And I always say that we've got to be cautious that we're not finding solutions in search of a problem, because no one's had any discussion about this. There hasn't been a study resolution or a study committee on this. And then we also have a bill next week that would impact our workers' comp business, because you can't, if you have THC in your bloodstream and you're injured in a workplace accident, you're accepted from workers' comp benefits. Right now, while there is medical marijuana, it's recommended. It's not prescribed, and it's still against federal law. So I think this is a bigger conversation than just simply taking the references out of law away. So I think it's going to take a little bit more time, and we're going to see where the feds go with this and what the state does with this. But that's pretty much what we have going on at the Capitol right now.
All right, let's take a break and hear from our sponsor, Louisiana Seafood.
Louisiana restaurants are open and ready to serve you. This is Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. Satisfy your cravings with world-famous Louisiana seafood. All the flavors you love, prepared by our world-famous chefs, and fresh from our bountiful waters to your plate. So head over to your local favorite restaurant and be sure to ask for authentic Louisiana seafood. Brought to you by the Louisiana Restaurant Association and Louisiana Seafood Board. A perfect pair.
Welcome back. Thanks to Louisiana Seafood for making this podcast possible. Stan, you want to tell us what's going on at the federal level?
Yeah, at the federal level, one of the big concerns that we have as an industry is the nomination of Julie Su to be the Department of Labor Secretary. This is a very influential position, and her background is working in a similar role at the state of California. And I can tell you that we certainly don't want our business to operate similar to how the state of California works. Try finding a plastic glass that will hold a beverage, or a styrofoam cup, or a straw that doesn't collapse. Those things just don't exist in California. But at the same time, their work rules, she was a big proponent of the FAST Act. The FAST Act would have sought to appoint a board by the state that was made up of union operatives and employees that would decide the wage and benefits and then impose these on the quick service industry. And she's made it very clear that her goal would be to try to spread that over the entire country. So again, we've been very, very vocal in our opposition to her nomination in that particular role. A couple of weeks ago, we finally got a bill filed that would possibly open up credit card competition and have the potential of reducing some of the interchange and transaction fees. I will tell you that it is going to be a long road, because I think the bankers and the people from the credit card platforms will be coming in with their folks to talk about why they need this, because that's basically the spread that they operate their business on, besides maybe an annual fee. So that's going to be a tough thing to get passed. And there's also legislation being floated, has not been filed yet, that would seek to provide for those that were not able to get any restaurant revitalization fund money, be able to pick up a tax credit per quarter based on operating losses during that impact period. It's not going to just give it to them for the heck of it. They're going to have to show that their business shrank and that they suffered losses during that time.
Got it. And, of course, we have the NRA Public Affairs Conference coming up in June the 19th through the 21st.
Yeah, that should be an interesting time. It's for us, normally we do this in March or April, early on into the congressional calendar, and this is going to be a little bit later in the year. We've got about 25 or so folks that are registered to join us in Washington. They'll get some great policy briefings. One of our speakers will be Karl Rove, who used to be counselor to President George W. Bush, and also Robert Gibbs, who was press secretary for President Obama, and also served in a senior communications role with McDonald's for about 5 years. On Wednesday, we'll do our normal hill climb where we'll try to see our 2 senators and our 6 congressmen, and that night we'll finish with a send-off dinner for all of our attendees. So we certainly hope if you have an interest in learning more about federal policy that you'll try to put this on your schedule, and seeing that it is in June and graduations are over and all those things.
Stuff.
There's less excuses for not making the trip right now. But if you need any information, you can reach out to us at the LRA office. That's certainly something that's worthwhile.
All right, let's take a break and hear from the LRA Workers' Comp Program.
Louisiana hotels know a thing or two about hospitality, from the thread count of the sheets, to the little scented soaps in the bath, to the praline on the pillow. For the Louisiana Restaurant Association's SIF, the same is true when it comes to workers' comp. Our team knows what Louisiana hotels need when it comes to your team's safety and your success. Everybody who's anybody goes with LRA Workers' Comp. Ask around. In this business, word of mouth is everything.
We're back, and we're going to talk about some local issues, and there's no shortage of local issues here where we're just a stone's throw at the LRA headquarters from New Orleans Parish. You want to tell us a little bit about what's going on in the Big Easy?
Yeah, certainly. So some of our parishes, like Jefferson Parish, where the LRA headquarters is located, will have its elections this year. Yeah. So all of the council people, the at-large positions, and then in Orleans Parish, they run on a different calendar. So they're actually into the second year of their cycle. So they're not going to have any significant elections this year, which maybe they're going to find some sort of rhythm in what they're doing. One of the issues that's been up for a great deal of conversation was dealing with commercial short-term rentals. And the impact of commercial short-term rentals and how business interests were acquiring buildings that might have been apartments with multifamily and treating it as a hotel to get licensed, but in fact running it as single short-term rental operations. So that is an issue that the Hotel and Lodging and New Orleans and Company is paying very, very careful attention to. And we're having some conversations online and offline with members of the council. Just, the easy part when you're for something, you come to us and say, well, those folks eat out in restaurants. And I'm sure some of them do, but there's no real statistical data that shows any of that. It's just anecdotal or supposition. And then the other thing, and I was attending a meeting in the French Quarter a couple of weeks ago, the Vieux-Carré Commission is an additional level of authority when you're getting your licenses renewed in the French Quarter. And their job is to really look at the style, the design, the elements that maintain the French Quarter, the historical elements of it, and the like. And we had probably 30 or 40 businesses and members gathered at the Court of Two Sisters to talk with the district council member, Freddie King, about some of the challenges our members have experienced. In Orleans Parish, you have to renew your liquor license rather early, and one of the check marks that you have is getting it from the VCC to show that you don't have any violations. Well, what we found in our research was that none of the businesses that were selling T-shirts or furniture or anything else were getting held up, but all the restaurants and alcohol permits were. One of our members that's been in business for over 100 years and hasn't modified their building in 12 years was cited for having too many logos on their building.
Oh, come on.
Now, it was never adjudicated. They never were fined. They never were anything else. But they put the black mark against them where they weren't able to get their liquor license without our intervention. And they're doing things today like taking drones and flying them over courtyards and looking at rooftop air conditioning and things of that sort that are a little bit more intrusive because, if you're replacing an air conditioner that was built in 1970, you're probably not going to get the same type of footprint or the same external look that you had in 1970 because those equipment pieces are not available anymore.
Right.
So looking at those two things in the city area, that's going to be a really tough situation because the prior councils really for the last 4 to 6 years before this council turned a deaf eye
Right.
toward doing anything, a deaf ear, I guess, turned a deaf ear to anything dealing with short-term rentals, and it expanded because they weren't enforcing any of the regs that were already on the books. It's unfair to the hotel community that has tens of millions of dollars invested, and it's also unfair to the people who live within the Vieux Carré, for example, that that's supposed to be prohibited. But if you check the websites of many of the short-term rental platforms, they're offering those for rent. So, I think it's a community discussion that you have to get down to thinking about what do you want your community to be like? Do you want to decimate your affordable housing? Do you want to turn those residential areas into commercial areas? And in many cases, the person that's renting that spot doesn't realize they're in the middle of a neighborhood.
Right.
And while they're coming to have a bachelor party or celebrate a birthday or family reunion or something like that, somebody's just trying to get their kids to bed so they can go to school and go to work the next day.
I have 2 on my block. It is the trash, the folks walking around with their roller bags. It's really hilarious. I'm like, you guys, did you take an Uber to Magazine and then walk the 4 blocks?
I stayed in the French Quarter the other night after a business dinner, and I was surprised leaving the next morning the number of people walking down the middle of Royal Street dragging bags.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering where they were going to because we don't have subways, and the
No.
streetcar's a block over, so it was
it's
just
very
kind of a
strange.
surprise.
I'm like, it's walkable, but I mean, you don't really have to drag your suitcase behind you with all the options for getting to the airport.
Yeah, and to wrap this Capital Connection and advocacy update, the one thing that I remind our members and our industry, if you are active in your community, you're active with your contemporaries in the industry, please recommend that they join the Louisiana Restaurant Association. We are the best source for their information. We're their best source for advocacy, action, and impact. And while we don't lobby individual issues for an additional business per se, a lot of those become collaborative issues, and we work together on, much like Senate Bill 194 that was dealing with alcohol service. It wasn't targeted at restaurant licenses. It wouldn't have had any impact on restaurants. But we do have quite a few bars who are members, and we wanted to be able to do that. And again, when we went to the hearing that day, I had some folks in the bar industry say, well, you guys didn't go testify. We didn't have to. We'd already done our work.
Right.
We had taken the bill and put it in a posture that was much more palatable and dealing with bad behavior than making everybody cut with the same brush.
Right.
So I think that's what, when we look at the value of what it is that we do, on those days, there were 4 or 5 of us on our advocacy team working about that. We were putting messaging out. We almost launched our first legislative alert of the session, but we chose not to do it because we were getting really close to a solution that would work. And you don't want to go spike the ball.
No.
That's not the spirit of what a trade association does, and it's certainly not the way that I like to do leadership because, the person that's working against you today or filed a particular bill, they may be very passionate about it. They might have a family member, a neighbor that this impacts, and at the same time I might need them to help us support something else that's a little bit more business friendly that they might want to take a look at.
And what do you like to say? If you work in politics, you need to have
thick skin and a short memory.
And with that, we'll conclude this episode. Stay tuned for more coming soon. We have another 5 weeks in the session. Till next time, thank you.